How do you do, ladies and gentlemen, to this lovely video here. On today's video, I'm on a mission because MTZ, my friend for a million years now, he sent me an invitation to his wedding and the time has finally come. While the big day was arriving, I actually decided that I'm going to make him a gift and I'm going to 3D print him a life-size Metroid helmet. And so in today's video, I'll be showing you exactly how I did that and how I came here and gave him this gift. At the same time as I'm working on this helmet, I'm also juggling between finishing my finals and doing exams and everything. It was crazy, but it'll all make sense in this lovely video here. And so fun fact, this semester, my school actually opened up a new studio where they had resources to create things like laser wood cutting, stickers, t-shirt printing, and all sorts of awesome stuff. But what I wanted to do immediately was go straight to the 3D printing section. But this time, my vision was larger. Because he's a huge Metroid fan and he's given me a few Metroid gifts in the past, MTZ has actually asked me before if I could make him a wearable Samus helmet. And so a few years ago, I actually made one myself. It was pretty cheesy, kind of rickety-crickety helmet made out of cardstock. It was basically just an entire giant origami thing, and so it wasn't put together very well, and it was a little bit broken. But I remember telling him that I'm not gonna make you one right now. I'll only make you a helmet when I can figure out how to make it like an actual wearable helmet so it doesn't fall apart and it's not rickety-crickety. And so now I need to actually figure out, okay, where do I get this helmet from? How do I print it out? And how am I gonna give it to him on his wedding? I looked up files online and luckily found a full wearable Metroid Prime helmet model. The only problem was that the school's 3D printer wasn't large enough to print this entire thing in one go. So I tried using Blender to kind of like slice the helmet into pieces, into multiple different angles, and I tried everything. But for whatever reason, whenever I tried any of this, it was like two separate pieces instead of being one full piece. There was just this entire emptiness on the inside, and so none of it was filled in or connected. That would not have printed out correctly at all. And on top of that, I was still trying to figure out, what to do for my final exams, for my final projects. And I wanted to have the 3D printing stuff happen in the background, right? Because it takes a while. To be honest, it was pretty difficult to figure out because I was running out of free time. Like I barely had any time for myself. Luckily, I looked it up online, and on the same page where I found that Metroid helmet, somebody actually remixed this model and created a version that was already pre-cut into like 8 or 9 different pieces. And so I was like, all right, this is awesome. This can finally be my, my answer to this problem that I've been trying to figure out for so long now. And then the pieces, I made sure that they all fit and they worked. They were about, like I said, maybe 8 or 9 different pieces in total to print. And so now that that was figured out, I actually had to make sure like that the helmet itself was going to be printed to the right size so it can be completely wearable. I didn't have a measuring tape at that point, so instead I just used a USB cable and I put it around my forehead like this, and it pretty much came about to like 22.5 inches. My head is huge, right? And so to be safe, I gave myself a little bit of extra breathing room too. And so in total, I rescaled the helmet to 123% in the 3D program. Then I sent the files over to the 3D printer at the school, and every single day I had to make a new appointment if I wanted to have a new piece printed out. Since there were so many huge parts to do though, they all had to be printed in black. And even though I would have preferred it to be red to make the painting process a lot easier, I was just happy that I was able to get this working in the first place at all. And so we mainly used the Bamboo X1 carbon printer, which was a lot faster than the other ones in that studio. So anything that would take maybe about 7 hours in the other 3D printers would take about 2 hours in the Bamboo one. And so depending on how complex and like detailed each piece is, I would say they took about maybe 8 hours to print in total. And it would have been nice if it all went smoothly, but most of the time the printer actually had quite a lot of issues. A lot of the pieces were either worn out, the filament got clogged up, or anything like that, right? And the thing is with 3D printing, if something happens in the middle of the printing, then you have to restart all the way from the start. Like that piece is now garbage, like you have to throw it out. There's a lot of going back and forth, making new appointments, working on the finals at the same time, and then visiting the studio to see if the print was actually successful. And because of that, the printing process alone took about 1.5 months to finish. And when the first piece was finally printed out, I was so excited, telling myself, oh my God, this looks so awesome. It looks so cool, it looks so detailed, it looks just like the model in game. I was thinking in my head like, okay, I have a lot to do, I have a lot of work at school and then this wedding to prepare for, but I might actually figure this out as long as I can manage my time correctly. I also printed the visor itself, I printed the tubes, the little triangle piece and everything. And it was so awesome seeing them all put together, laid out like this, all the pieces ready to go. At this point, I knew that I had to finish this helmet. I just needed to actually find the time now to build it. But like I said, I was pulling all-nighters at this point, finishing my final projects, finishing my exams, right? I had no time for this helmet pieces, but I was just glad that the 3D printing part was out of the way. And then while I was waiting on my final projects and my exams, I had an idea. I'm like, MTZ has this awesome helmet that's going to be built. I need to make him a helmet stand as well. And I remember finding this video where this person made helmet stands. And so that was perfect. I added some customized text. I made it very cheesy. I wrote, congratulations, I'm finding your player too. And then the galaxy is at peace. It's a reference to Metroid and MTZ knows exactly what that means. And then I also used the sticker machine at the studio and I decided to print out a QR code that I'm going to have at the bottom of the base of this helmet stand. And it's going to send MTZ to the video you're watching right now. And I was going to bamboozle him and be like, hey, MTZ, I heard you like playing like ultimate frisbee. Here's a frisbee for you, right? But he doesn't know it's actually a helmet stand. And so that was all going on in my head as I was creating this like plan and like how I was going to actually, you know, create this and give it to him on his wedding day. And then alongside the base, there's also this pole and this little cap at the top, which is supposed to hold the helmet itself. But the printer kept failing and time was running out, so I couldn't finish it when I wanted to. So if anything, I'll send him the final pieces, like with the cap as well, in the future. And by the time I finished all of my exams and all my final projects, I had no time left to work on the helmet. So instead, I packed everything into my backpack. All the materials, all the spray paints, all the window tint I got, the acrylic paint, everything that I needed, my soldering iron, and I just put it into my backpack to figure out later. Afterwards, I had to go back to Walmart and pick up some more extra materials that I didn't have in the first place. That was like metallic looking paint, some sandpaper, and the hot glue sticks, and everything that you see right here. And so because the 3D prints, they all have supports, they had to be removed before I started to work on the helmet itself. And so I used these little pliers and I gently like removed all the supports, making sure to get every single corner, every single like hole, everything. Not only that, but some of the pieces printed out with small holes inside them too. And so I realized that you can actually use this wood filler to fill up those holes, and then in a few hours it dries up and then it hardens. And then you can sand that down and you have your final piece ready to go. And so for this process, I use this little tiny plastic knife and this little scooper thing here too. And for the most part, it kind of felt like playing with wet sand when you put it all together. I filled in as much as I possibly could without deforming the entire helmet shape, and then I smoothened it out, even though it was pretty tedious to do. I had to fill in about 8 different holes, and I think the hardest one was back here in this vent area itself. While I was doing this, I was also watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood in the background. I could finally, finish through the show that I started back in like 2016. That was a nice distraction while I was kind of mindlessly working on this project. And so after you applied the wood filler, you had to wait about an hour or a few for it to all dry and harden. After that, I put the 2 pieces together, like you make sure that everything is lined up, and then I tape them at the top right here, making sure to close the gap as much as I possibly could. And the plan was to use a soldering iron to physically melt the plastic together and keep them from moving apart. So with the tape holding down the pieces, I waited for the iron to heat up, and literally melted the plastic together alongside the seams. And I did this kind of like an X pattern, making sure to go from one side all the way down until I made it to the other side, going all the way down the opposite side too. And melting plastic though creates these fumes, which probably isn't healthy for you to breathe in. And I'm assuming it's also very toxic. I try to stay away from, actually getting it in my face and holding my breath and whatnot, and being in a open lit area. But in the end, I probably shortened my life by 15 years, if I'm being honest, just doing this, soldering process for the helmet itself. Once those two pieces were done, I added the end piece. And the nice thing about 3D printing is that it prints the model exactly as it is in the file. So you can follow the lines to connect everything correctly as long as the size is right. Sometimes it was hard to get the correct angle with the soldering iron, and so it created holes that I would later have to fix with the wood filler. Once I had these three pieces together, I realized just how huge this helmet was going to be. And I was glad that I made it large enough for my head to fit inside to wear. I couldn't resist but to try it on, even though it was only half a helmet completed right now. And I hope MTZ likes it once it's completely finished. After that, I started working on the other half of the helmet at this point using the same method as I did before. I took two of the pieces, I lined them together, then I taped the outside, closing the gap as much as I could before finally melting the plastic edges together with the soldering iron to keep everything nice and secured. Once that was finished, I attached the third piece the exact same way using tape, the soldering iron, and all while watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, as it was all slowly coming back to me after all of these years. I was just glad that the semester and the finals were over so I could finally work on this helmet. And I was going full speed here, no sleep at all, just making progress and recording footage for this video. There were definitely more accidental soldering holes created on this side too, but it's nothing that the wood filler couldn't easily fix. And once all those pieces were soldered in together, I added even more wood filler to the inside of the second half too. After that hardened, I now had both pieces of the helmet ready to go. And then after taping the two halves together, this was the first time I actually got to see the entire helmet resembling its final shape. And even on my giant head, there's maybe about an inch on the side of both sides with plenty of room in the front and the back too. And so the plan was to actually use that extra space for foam to make the helmet more comfortable when wearing. And once I was happy with how the two halves lined up, I slowly started soldering them together, and then I started from the back and went all the way to the visor section. Once I finished with that, I realigned the nose piece and soldered that too. I made sure to really melt the plastic here to keep the helmet from falling apart. And with that, the helmet was finally put together and holding strong. Then I applied more wood filler to reinforce and hide the inside soldering job, and as that dried, I added even more wood filler to any of the areas on the outside of the helmet where each piece connected and left behind a visible gap. I wanted the seams to be smooth and invisible, like one solid helmet piece, and the wood filler did an awesome job at creating that illusion. Once that dried, I even added water to the wood filler to make it much easier to paint inside of the giant seam that connected both of the halves of the helmet together of the outside part. I just slowly made progress, completely losing track of time. I would have thought that the soldering and wood filler took maybe about an hour to complete, when in reality, I finished at around 11 AM the next morning, as it actually took the entire night to get done. This process left behind a huge mess, but I didn't mind. I was on a mission, as seeing this helmet put together like this was completely worth it. I then brought the helmet outside to sand it down. Looking back, it probably would have saved a lot of time and maybe even looked a little bit better too if I didn't have to put any of the wood filler on there, but I wanted to make sure that everything was nice and sturdy, it was hardened, and it would last forever for MTZ so it doesn't fall apart as he's wearing it randomly in a few years. I had a fine sandpaper block and 3 harder grit sheets to work with on this helmet. Originally, I was going to bring my own handheld sander from home, as it would have made this entire process a lot easier, faster, and smoother, but I had no space in my luggage at all. I started with the outside and sanded down every corner and seam to make the wood filler as smooth as possible against the 3D printed helmet. Once the initial sanding was done, I used canned air to spray off the dust and inspected what else needed to be done a second time around. Then I continued sanding, first with the harder grit to remove any bumps, until finishing with the finer block to make it really smooth. I kept repeating this process until everything was sanded down and looked really awesome. At this point, it looked kind of like the helmet had a camouflage skin going on here, with all the different colors clashing together. The inside of the helmet was even more tedious though because of its bowl shape, but I sanded away. Using some more canned air and even a hair dryer to blow off all the dust, as well as a paintbrush for those hard to reach places. I then attached some of the sandpaper onto the plastic knife, as that was able to fit into the outside indent to smoothen out that section too. Sanding everything was a lot of work, but a necessary step towards making this resemble Samus's helmet from the Metroid Prime series. And now that everything was completely smooth, it was time to prime the entire helmet to get it ready for painting. And primer is this gray spray paint that turns the helmet into one solid color. Not only that, but it also adds a layer of protection, strengthens the helmet, and hides any small imperfections or missed holes. So I started by spraying the inside first, slowly making my way through to reach every angle and corner. As that dried, I then primed the outside of the helmet too, alongside the tubes, the base, and the visor pieces. I then let that sit for a few hours, and at this point, not only did it look awesome, but it also revealed the few areas that I missed the first time around. So I flipped everything over and primed the other side too, even going back with a second coat to get in as many details as possible. Doing the same for the accessory pieces before letting that all dry out overnight. The next day, the helmet was completely primed and I was really happy with the overall results. Even though there were still a few small spots that could have used a third coat, I wasn't worried as the paint would easily cover those up. And the original plan was to first spray paint most of the helmet with this metallic red color, and then manually fill in the indents with the metallic black paint. However, I was very tired and completely forgot about that entire plan. So instead, I spray painted the inside completely black. At that point, I covered the indents black too, and because it started raining, I quickly did the same thing to the tubes as well, only to realize that those were going to be covered in metallic silver instead. So I finished up with the base and let that dry. Once it did, I realized that I made a huge mistake in spray painting the indents black, as it caused the paint itself to seep down the helmet and harden, which then created these ugly bumps and shapes that I really didn't like at all, as this would show through once the helmet was completely finished. And not only that, but with how spray paint actually works, multiple coats of this would have been required for the black to actually appear the right color, instead of this washed out gray as you see here. I didn't really have the extra time to work with spray paint anymore, as the wedding was now only a few days away. So I went back to sand down the bumps that the black spray paint created, and decided to use regular paint to finish the rest from this moment forward. That way, I knew that once the paint was applied, its color would remain consistent throughout. And even though this helmet is huge, I love that all of the original details remained intact. And having your face close to the visor section like this balances the entire weight out evenly. But even then, there was still enough space for someone's head to fit in comfortably too. Moving all the way back though, there was probably about 6 inches of space that was more than enough for the support foam to fill. If anything, MTZ can also always make any future adjustments to better fit his head as well. And with that, I still needed to find some red acrylic metallic paint for the helmet itself. Luckily, Hobby Lobby had these 2 bottles available, which ended up being the exact color that I needed. From there, I packed all the remaining materials together as the day has finally arrived to visit MTZ himself. And so while enjoying the pretty scenery from his part of the world, I also slowly started painting the helmet red. And by the time I arrived, here's how much I was able to finish. And even though it was now around 2 AM, sleeping had to wait, as there was no time left to waste anymore. As Full Metal Alchemist continued playing in the background, I also continued to add more coats of red onto the outer parts of this helmet, giving it that beautiful shiny look. And I couldn't stop smiling at the fact that this was actually coming together so well. I then used the black metallic paint to get into all of the indents to finally make those colors really pop, before using the silver metallic paint on the tubes themselves and the front triangle accessory piece too. From there, I painted the stand base to give it a darker and more even coat of black, and while that dried, I even added some metallic green to the visor itself too, which really made it stand out compared to the other colors, before flipping the base over and painting the top half in the same way. I then used this white paint pen to go over the cheesy message on the base to make it really stand out from the background. And today was also MTZ's bachelor party, so the plan was actually to hang out with him, chilling with the boys all day long. However, I needed to sleep because I didn't sleep at all and spent those few hours doing exactly that. He then had the actual party at this mini golf arcade place. And so after like 10 years of knowing him from online Discord chats and Twitch streams, I was finally able to meet MTZ's mom for the first time, as well as the rest of his family. MTZ was in full focus mode, getting a high score in Galaga before we finally went to go play mini golf together. It was a hoot, and I'm sure my VR training in Walkabout mini golf helped a lot too, as I was even able to get a few hole-in-ones during my time here. We then went to a Mongolian all-you-can-eat place and got real chunky on the snacks here, enjoying full hibachi bowls and just chatting away about all kinds of things. But despite taking a little break, my mission still wasn't over. So I set out farewells for the night and went straight back to working on the helmet, as the wedding now was less than 12 hours away, which meant another day of no sleeping. And so I continued to fix the helmet even further by applying little spots of red whenever the black seeped over, as well as the other way around too. Once I was happy with the helmet's look and color, I sprayed a few clear coats of this to give the entire helmet an extra layer of protection and to keep the paint looking extra shiny. Doing the same thing for the base and the helmet accessories before turning those over to get the opposite sides as well. And while the helmet was drying from the protective coat, it was time to work on the transparent visor itself, so MTZ can actually wear the helmet and still be able to see out of it too. For this, I bought a large sheet of acrylic that was not only flexible, but thin enough where I can bend it to shape easily as much as I wanted. From there, I used the 3D printed visor as a template to make an outline on the acrylic sheet, leaving about an inch of extra space alongside the edges for the Velcro strips to attach onto. I then cut that piece into the visor shape, and from there, brought out this green window tint to attach on the top of it. One side peels off and sticks onto any surface, so it's recommended to make that surface wet. And I did exactly that and tried applying the window tint, but every single time I did, there were so many air bubbles or creases from the roll itself, as working with this window tint was just pure hogwash, as I ended up using the entire roll trying to remove the air bubbles and then getting frustrated only to take it off and trying again with another piece. The visor itself was meant to keep its transparent look, but just in a green color, similar to the Metroid Prime games. But what ended up happening instead, you can see all of the imperfections looking through the visor itself. And I didn't have any more of the window tint to work with, and so I just left it as is. And so once the window tint was applied to both the front and the back of the visor, I then cut these Velcro strips into squares and attached 4 pieces each to the outside edges of the visor, as well as the inside of the helmet. Seeing the transparent visor connected to the helmet almost brought a little tear, as all of this hard work was paying off. After painting some finishing touches to the accessories, I first hot glued the triangle attachment to the front of the helmet, then both of the tubes to the side of that, as seen here. And it was beautiful, but there was still one more thing missing, and that was the lights. That's right. Not only did I want to make MTZ a wearable life-size helmet from Metroid Prime with a transparent visor, but I wanted to add bright lights for that extra added effect too. So I got these Wi-Fi controlled LED strips as well as a portable USB power bank that was going to be attached by Velcro. That way, MTZ could easily remove the power bank to recharge the lights whenever he wanted to reuse them. However, when I opened the lights, I realized that they weren't actually USB powered, but instead needed a wall outlet, which isn't exactly portable, so I'm not sure how I missed that completely. Luckily, Walmart did have a replacement, but it didn't have any Wi-Fi and instead used a remote, so I ended up using that instead. From there, I attached Velcro to the power bank and then stuck that inside the back of the helmet so that the weight was evenly balanced once it was on your head. After that, I attached all 8 feet of the new USB lights inside of the helmet, connecting it first with the USB to the power bank, then around the sides, and then looping twice around the visor itself. And those lights really added to the final look of the helmet and came out looking insane. What's awesome is that the remote also lets MTZ change through a variety of different colors, like green, red, blue, purple, and whatever, as well as having a cheesy feature that reacts to music or noises. The only problem is in order to change all of these colors, you have to take the helmet off and point near the power bank, as that is where the controls are located. Either way, I am very jealous of this entire helmet and just how nice it's ended up being. And now that everything was pretty much done, the final part was cutting down this foam and gluing it inside the helmet to make it a lot more comfortable to wear. This 2-inch foam was the perfect thickness, so I eyeballed it and cut about 5 blocks of it with scissors. Then I just hot glued the pieces to the top, the sides, the back, and the front inside of the helmet, making sure to wear the helmet and test out if any adjustments needed to be made before gluing them into place. I even added a few extra pieces to the side so that the helmet wasn't too loose or end up swiveling out of place every time MTZ rotated his head. And with the foam now glued to the helmet, it was finally complete. And not only does it look top-notch, but the metallic red color, the black outlines with the silver accessories, everything just popped as if it was straight from the game. Not only that, but the 3D printed visor piece fits right into the visor slot too, and can also act as extra protection or just a nice display piece to the entire helmet. And then here is what the final mess looked like with about 30 minutes left to the wedding. I had everything all over the place and even finished watching through Full Metal Alchemist right on time. I then attached a sneaky QR code sticker to the bottom of the stand base, which until this video you are watching right now was uploaded. It actually sent MTZ to this video instead.
Coming soon to own on video and DVD.
And with all of the steps put together, you have the final helmet right here. And the last thing to do now is to actually give it to him at the wedding. So with that said, let's go see him. And so MTZ had a really spiffy wedding, full of rubber ducks and inside jokes and all kinds of games to enjoy, even though I didn't know anybody else there. But there were plenty of snacks for my chunky self, so I made sure to have one of everything on the menu. He even had this trivia event going on where the table I sat in all won first place and got to keep a few of these cheesy prizes as a memory of this event too. There were even these awesome Lego creations on display too. My table had a solar system model that rotates to reveal different times of the year depending on the location of the planets. My boy MTZ was now a married man, and it brought a little tear to these wrinkly eyes of mine after all of our online adventures together. I would have never thought that stealing his Samus armor in Metroid Federation Force all those years ago would have brought us together on this day. And there were a lot of people at the wedding that were all either taking pictures or talking with MTZ and just doing their stuff. So I let them do their thing instead of getting in the way. And most of the wedding gifts were actually left on a gift table, but the helmet itself was more in a bag rather than a box. That and I came all this way to personally give MTZ the helmet myself. So I waited until the event began to slow down as people were starting to leave, before finally surprising MTZ with this cheesy wedding gift.
So, I hear you like Frisbee, of course.
We do like Frisbee.
Here we go. I made you a
Oh, thank you very much. That's very cool.
Totally a frisbee, I swear. Not suspicious at all.
What's the like? What is it plug? Is it like a plug-in thing? Wow.
I made you a helmet.
That is impressive. Thank you very much. Wow. That is
Don't mind the visor.
that is really cool. No, thank you. That is genuinely really cool. Wow.
But it smells like spray paint because I was doing it yesterday.
No, it's very cool.
There you go. And ready. So there's an extra visor.
Oh,
If anything, you can just,
that's insanely cool, man.
So this one comes off. It's got Velcro.
Oh.
I had difficulties with the bubbles.
Right.
So if anything, I'll send you I'll make a new one.
It's great, man. Thank you very much.
And if you want, you could just
That is
kind of put that in there.
That is way above and beyond.
And then it's in the backpack, but I have a remote. It actually lights up.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
And I 3D printed this at school. It took like a month and a half.
That's insanely cool.
And then when I
Thank
got
you.
here, like, well, I was doing my finals.
Yeah.
And then on Tuesday last week, I came here, I took all the stuff. And then from Tuesday to this morning, I was painting and spray painting.
It's so
and
cool, man. Thank you so
There you
much.
go.
thing ever.
There you go. It might
Thank
be
you.
a
That
little,
is awesome.
might be a little huge.
No.
Like light.
No, it's great. We will make it work.
And then this is supposed to be a
stand
stand,
for it, yeah.
but the 3D printing, some technical difficulties. So I already had to get to the train.
No worries.
So I'll send you, when it finishes, and then maybe next week
Scan that?
that might go somewhere.
All right. Thank you very much, man.
There you go.
This is very much. Thank you. That is awesome.
And just like that, after all this work, I was able to surprise MTZ with a homemade wearable helmet from the Metroid Prime series. I then shared how the power bank can be detached to charge up the lights, as well as the plan of sending over the rest of the finished helmet stand pieces once I get the chance. The transparent visor can also be detached, and he didn't seem to mind all the air bubbles, but I'd still like to send him the fixed version of the visor in the future too. Overall, I think MTZ liked the helmet, and it seemed his family were gathering around to enjoy it too. So I'm glad it all came together as a nice way to finish his special day. So thank you MTZ for being a pal for a million years now, for helping me out on Patreon too, for all the late night stream chats, for all the helpful random life advice, and especially for reaching out last year when I was in a very dark place, as I probably wouldn't be standing here right now if it wasn't for you. All the awesome Metroid gifts are really spiffy too, so feel free to keep sending those my way. And being invited as a guest to your wedding is something I will never forget. Even though I look like an oddball with my cheesy little fishing hat here, I still had a spiffy time. Hopefully next time we can hang out even more in person, where I don't have to be sneaking off trying to surprise you with a gift, as I would have totally taken you out in Super Smash Bros. Or Mario Kart 8. In the end, I think all of these materials in total cost over $150, which would have been a lot more had the 3D printing stuff not been available for free at my school. So here's a huge thank you to everyone that was patient with me and my crazy ideas for making this helmet a reality. Not only that, but this dude's video tutorial here, it also helped me out a lot in regards to the overall steps needed to go from 3D printing a helmet to the finished version that I was able to make. And then on top of that, there was also the month-and-a-half time that I spent actually having to create the Metroid helmet itself while juggling end of semester school stuff. So if you want to see the almost 4-hour-long unedited footage of the full helmet build, then take a yonder at that video on the Jacob72 VOD channel. And with that said, ladies and turds, thank you for watching my lovely video here. Thank you to all the Patreon boys that support my channel. If you want to do the same, feel free to become a supporter as well. And with that said, I'm very happy to say that I can finally enjoy my summer vacation now that the semester is finished, and now that this helmet is finished as well. So with that said, I shall see you all in another lovely video. Goodbye everybody. Goodbye.